Sleep is the Kevlar for your mind. Not my words, but the words used by this week's guest to describe how important sleep is. Getting enough sleep has had so many proven benefits, and not getting enough sleep has had so many proven downsides, so why don't we prioritise it more? How much sleep should we get, and how can we make sure that we get the right amount and the right quality? Well, that's what we're going to find out in this week's episode. I'm Jeremy Klein, and this is Change Work Life. Hello and welcome to the Change Work Life podcast, where we're all about beating the Sunday evening blues and enjoying Mondays again. If you want to know how you can enjoy a more satisfying and fulfilling working life, you're in the right place. Here are some of the things which studies have demonstrated sleep can do for you. It can make you more productive. It can increase your life expectancy. It can enhance your memory and creativity. It can make you more attractive, aid weight loss, and lower food cravings. It reduces risk of heart attacks, strokes, and diabetes. With all these benefits, why are so many of us not getting enough sleep? Why aren't we making it a priority? What can you do to make sure you get enough? To answer these questions and more, I'm delighted to be joined this week by Terry Cralle. Terry is a registered nurse, a certified clinical sleep educator, and a certified professional in healthcare quality, specialising in sleep, health and wellness. She educates people on the importance of sleep to physical and psychological health, growth and development, safety, optimum functioning, productivity, peak performance, and quality of life. Terry, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Jeremy. It's a pleasure to be here.
Terry, I'm going to dive straight in with the question which bothers me the most on the question of sleep, which is, how do I stop waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning?
Well, let me tell you. Don't stress over it because it's normal to wake up several times during the night. Often we don't remember we've done it in the morning, or sometimes when we wake up, we start stressing out about being awake and worry about falling back asleep. So what do most people do? They try to fall back asleep, and that's the wrong thing to do. We never try to sleep. We never tell people to try to go back to sleep or just try to go to sleep. Trying is sort of an alerting term. Instead, we just tell people to relax and sleep will follow. So there's some things you can do if you wake up in the middle of the night. And another thing that I will say before I give you some strategies is our brain chemistry is a little bit different at 3 a.m. than it is at 3 p.m. We tend to be a little more emotional. We get more stressed out about little things that we're thinking about. So bear that in mind. But if you wake up in the middle of the night, relax, look around, go back to, is your room, that's a good point in time to look at the sleep environment. Is it truly dark? Did you wake up to use the restroom? If you did you turn on bright lights to get there and back? Did you check your phone while you were awake? Those are the pitfalls of waking up at the middle of the night that will keep you up if you're not careful. Don't check the clock. Don't worry about how many more hours of sleep you have. The point is, relax and sleep will follow. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. And the first thing you said there about people naturally wake up in the night and sometimes don't even remember it and just go back to sleep, I hadn't realized that. I mean, I've been conscious of occasions where I've woken up and then been aware that I have gone back to sleep pretty quickly. But then there have been those occasions where I've woken up and it feels like I stay awake for over an hour, and I start to, initially it starts out as just sort of thinking about things, maybe what happened yesterday, what's happening the day ahead, and that then turns into worry, and it can turn into stress, and it can start turning into playing arguments in your head and that kind of thing. And so it kind of follows on to my next question, which I think you've already partly dealt with, but that's the okay, so when you do wake up and you are awake of it, and it feels like it is taking you a long time to get back to sleep, what can you do to speed up the process, especially like me, where you are worried about how much sleep you're going to get that night?
Well, And sure, that's sort of a natural thing. But again, when I'm talking about a different brain chemistry, I don't pay attention to my brain at 3 a.m. I just disregard it because I know it's not a rational sort of situation going on. Now, there's something you can do during the day to help with that. And I always tell people at the end of their workday, write down everything they need to do, everything they should be worrying about, everything that's on their minds. Some people call that a brain dump, just get it on paper, because that's the neat part about it. It will all look a little more manageable on paper when you can look at it and put it in columns, lists, however you want to construct it. But overall it's more manageable than swirling around in your brain, because I know people have that sort of ruminating either when they're trying to fall asleep at bedtime or when they wake up in the middle of the night and then can't get back to sleep. So do that list making, write it all down. There's actually been a few studies about doing so, and that does help people with the nighttime issues. And again, don't pay any attention. Just realize it's an irrational thing. You always feel better in the morning when you wake up. I think that's sort of the old not wives' tale, but the thing we've always heard. You'll feel better. You'll think more clearly in the morning. You'll feel less stressed out in the morning when you get that sleep. So I say, don't worry about it. Relax. Use that time to just sort of mellow out. And, there are some sounds on some apps that can help. You can have a brief something on a timer, but if you need some sound to get back to sleep, things like that. But just another point to make during the middle of the night situation is that bedroom has to be optimized for sleep. I mean, seriously, as dark as possible, because that really does help with the melatonin production and maintenance through the night to keep you asleep. And, I think that's when the 3 a.m. wake up is, gosh, I should have, been shopping for a new mattress. I've had this one for 23 years and I don't feel comfortable. And look at some of the issues. Why are you waking up in the first place? I mean, are you waking up sort of gasping, heart pounding? You may be having something like apnea going on. Tossing and turning look at the room temperature. Look at things like, just is comfort. Too many blankets, not enough blankets. Just look at all, kind of reevaluate and assess things during the day, not at night, so they don't come full circle at 3 a.m.
There's a lot in there, and I want to dive into some of that a little bit more deeply. But first of all, tell the listeners a little bit more about you and why in particular have you found yourself specializing, focusing on sleep?
Yeah, it's sort of a unique subspecialty, but I went through nursing school about 100 years ago, and trust me, we didn't talk about sleep almost at all. And so then you start in the real world dealing with shift work and crazy hours, long shifts, and it really struck me. I got very intrigued with the topic when one of the nurses left a 12-hour night shift. And she stopped at a travel agency on the way home and bought a ticket to some South Sea island or something. And it was just one of those things where she sort of woke up while she was doing it thinking, wait, what am I doing here? It was a really strange thing. It was just a byproduct of being incredibly sleep deprived. And we've had, a lot of healthcare personnel experience, after shift work, car accidents, things like that. So it piqued my interest, but it wasn't until I started recruiting sleep doctors for an insomnia study. We started talking about insomnia and I was trying to get them to come on board with some clinical research. And finally, a very nice team of sleep docs invited me to their clinic and for a week. And I stayed up all night watching them study patients and slept all day. And I was hooked on it because it was so fascinating. It was something I knew nothing about. And then I realized and I started learning all of the benefits and how important it is and how it affects our physical health, our mental health. But really, every aspect of our functioning is impacted by sleep. So, yeah, I got hooked and I've never looked back. And I think it's so foundational to well-being that as a registered nurse, I just feel that that kind of completes the whole thing. And when I talk to people about health and quality of life, longevity, relationships, every aspect, I start with sleep because it's square one.
I think when we first met, you referred to it as something like Kevlar for your mind or Kevlar for your brain. Was that it?
Oh yeah, good memory you've got there. Yeah, you start learning of all of these wonderful things that it gives us. And that was a researcher, I believe, at Walter Reed Hospital who said sufficient sleep is like Kevlar for the mind. It makes us resilient. It helps us handle stress. It helps us think clearly, focus, be efficient. So it does amazing things. But I think for far too long, many of us, so many of us, unfortunately, look at sleep as sort of a time waster or taking away from our waking hours and sort of begrudge sleep or resent it or we can have contempt for it. And then I think along those lines, we've held people up in a high regard for, saying they don't get much sleep. They work, work, work. That's how they're successful. That's why they're successful. So we've on many levels glamorized and idealized sleeplessness. And we've looked at people that look at sleep as a biological necessity as possibly lazy, less motivated, less ambitious. If you're getting sleep, you're not getting it done kind of mentality. So in the last few years, we've had to flip this script and say that's not it at all. In fact, it's the opposite. We have to look at sleep as something to embrace, something to get. We're more responsible and safe and intelligent human beings when we get the sleep our bodies and minds need. So it's just a matter of looking at it differently and prioritizing it and really changing our attitude.
One question I've never seemed quite to get a straight answer to is how much is enough? Because I get the impression that it varies from person to person. So how do you figure out what your sweet spot is?
There's going to be some variation, but not a lot. And it's usually 7 to 9 hours. The research repeatedly shows that. This is for adults, mind you. But that 7 to 9 hour window is probably the most common. And I will say that there's a very common misconception about the sleep hour requirements. I see it all the time. I've been to Fortune 500 companies. I have a wide variety of adult audiences that repeatedly tell me that they've learned how to be a short sleeper. So let me tell you what a short sleeper is. Short sleepers have a genetic variant and they can do well. And when I say do well, perform well, they're healthy, they don't have any chronic illnesses, they tend to be successful. They have a good outlook, energetic, on and on. Okay, so they can do that, say with 5 to 6 hours daily, and there's no repercussions, no consequences, there's no ill effects. And that, I want everyone to know that statistic is less than 1% of the population. And if you're not that, you can't learn to become that. You can't learn to get by on less. It's not about willpower. It's not about acclimating. That doesn't work. And that's why we have to kind of pedal back and think of sleep as a biological necessity. Like we can't learn how to get by on less water. Obviously people that overeat can learn how to get by on less food, but think of it as a hydration thing. We wouldn't say, well, I've learned how to get by on drinking no water a day. I mean, clearly that would be unsafe, unhealthy, and all of the above. But sleep is the same thing. It's a biological necessity. We don't get used to it. I had one gentleman at a corporation for Q&A. He asked me, he said, isn't it true you can just get used to not getting much sleep? And I said, no, it's not true. And he said, well, I've done it. And I want you to know he was asleep during most of my presentation. And I always tell my audiences, if you sleep during my presentation, it's because you're sleep deprived. If you're bored, you'll doodle on your notepad, you'll look up at the ceiling, you'll play with your pen. But if you're bored, you shouldn't fall asleep. So I think a lot of people fool themselves. And it's sad because the consequences can be dire. And I think we have to really look at it with some degree of seriousness and say, what do I want out of life? And when we talk about the best life, the best health, the best relationships, and really the longest life. We have to really put sleep first because it all goes back to sufficient sleep, whether it's diet, exercise, our mental well-being, how we learn, and just every aspect of functioning.
You've talked quite a lot about too little. Is there such a thing for a normal, healthy adult as too much sleep?
There's some debate about that. I mean, getting too much sleep might be a problem with it. Could be a physical, medical issue going on, depression, things like that. I'll say this: always address sleep at every healthcare provider encounter, because sleep is a vital sign, and we have to look at it that way. Even if your healthcare provider doesn't bring it up, address it so they have a baseline, so they know when there's problems. You might not think it's a problem, but it could be. So I always tell people to address sleep. It is a vital sign. Too much sleep, again, I'm on the 9.5, between 9.5 hours. I feel fantastic when I get it. I know some people, 7, if they sleep more than 7, they don't feel fantastic. So yeah, there's some variation, but I think sleep trackers are a great thing. I'm not pushing any brand or anything, but I think it gives us a point of reference. I mean, we count our calories, we count our steps. I think there's a little too much emphasis on, oh gosh, don't track your sleep. That'll make you, turn you into an insomniac because you'll stress about it. I don't think that's necessarily true. I don't think counting your steps will make you a nut in that regard or anything like that. I think it's good data to have. And I think it's also very good to have that kind of data to see where you are always. Are you accruing a sleep debt? Are you having problems? Are you having repeated awakenings during the night? Go see a healthcare provider. Sleep specialists are trained in this. They know how to deal with it. There are over 88 sleep disorders, and most of them are easily diagnosed and managed. And we've got to sort of tackle that, though, if we want to have good health, healthy immune systems, healthy metabolism, healthy weight, and of course, everything psychological. We want a good outlet. Look, reduced anxiety, an ability to handle stress, that resilience you referred to. We want all that on board. So look at it that way.
You used an interesting term there, sleep debt, which I take to mean that if you don't get enough sleep for a repeated period of time or for a lengthy period of time, then the effects of that can build up. When it comes to repaying the debt, presumably it's not like for like. So it's not like if you get, say your optimise is 8 and you get 7 one night, then you should get 9 the next night to build it up. I mean, how do you sort of repay this sleep debt if you've built one up?
Yeah, that's a good point, because I'll tell you, a lot of people that I interact with have what I call yo-yo sleeping. I mean, they'll undersleep, if not intentionally, just by way of how they've set up things. They'll undersleep during the work week and then oversleep on the weekend to make up. Now, I'm not saying oversleeping to make up for that is a bad thing. I think that's prudent, but I also am concerned with the research that shows the effects of undersleeping. We can't undo the damage that's done. Say if you're doing that during the week and then you oversleep on the weekend to make up, that's good, but we still can't undo some of that damage. The sleep deprivation, I mean, it affects us on a cellular level. It affects so much of what's going on inside with hormones, repair, the lymphatic system, cleaning toxic proteins from the brain. I mean, there's just so much going on. We're sort of pruning some memory formation. We're doing, there's a lot of things. And what we're doing, if you accrue a lot of sleep debt, either, can you pay it off? Try to, but try not to accrue it in the first place, because that's a real bad area to get into, because can we undo that damage if we do it several days later or a day later? We don't think so. I do like napping. I've had some inevitable, although I try to avoid them, early flights. I hate them. I'm not a morning person at all. I can't turn into one. I've tried. But I know when I'm underslept during the day, I make sure I get to that hotel in time to get a nap in. Naps can be a wonderful thing to keep sleep debt from building. I recommend those. Don't make them too long or too close to bedtime, of course, but try to look at it as that 7 to 9 hours every single 24 hours. We really need that daily to be our best. So let's just my thing is it can't be repaid. So I just tried to do everything possible not to accrue it.
7 to 9 hours within 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Is it correct to say that the vast majority of that should ideally be in one sitting, so to speak, and it's only perhaps if, like you described, if for some reason you get less sleep and then you have a bit of a nap partway through the following day, or can one really have, like, I don't know, 2 stints of 4 hours every 24-hour period?
Apparently there's been some research at the Virginia Tech University here in Virginia. Roger Eckert wrote a book about sleep several years ago, but some historians think it really came in 2 phases, that people went to sleep. This is all before electricity, of course. So we were really going by the sun, moon and sun in terms of our body clock. But there are a lot of people, historians, that believe we did do it in 2 phases, biphasic sleeping years ago. I think if it is the 8 hours solid, don't expect to wake up, don't expect to have any problems. Totally realistic? Maybe not. But I think right now that's what we're going to have to strive for based on all the electricity and things. But I think if you don't get it, napping is fine. I would use that, but we probably didn't do it like this throughout history, throughout humanity. It probably is a recent thing based on our modern day lives.
You just talk a little bit more about napping, because it's something which I've heard is both a good thing, really beneficial. Some people talk about a 10-minute power nap. I've heard other people say that having a 30, even 45-minute nap has really helped them in the afternoon. And then on the other side of the coin, there are people who say, oh no, if you sleep during the day, then that's just going to mean that you don't sleep properly during the evening. So yeah, I'd love to hear you expand a little bit more on that.
Yeah, napping intrigues me because it gets such a bad rap, too much. I mean, I'm confused why that is. Anyway, I think that napping can really help. Like, again, we've got real life here going on. We've got kids, teething at night, dogs barking. We've got things that will wake us up. Sometimes we can't get that 8 hours or 7 to 9 of continuous sleep at night, but naps come in very handy. I think the research is amazing that even a 10 or 15-minute nap can really restore your energy levels, sort of rejuvenate your brain a little bit, get you back on track, refocused. And I think in our culture, we've, always given people snack breaks, smoking, things that they can do, coffee breaks. And I would say, gosh, if a 10 or 15-minute nap can refresh you as much as a cup of coffee, I'd choose the nap any day. That caffeine throughout the day to stay awake is a sign that you're not getting enough sleep, or there's something wrong with your sleep if you're putting in the hours. I think some of the bad rap for napping is if it's over 30 minutes, you can, and it's all very situational. What's your situation? Are you taking a nap in a nap room at a hospital, while you're on call or something? If you're sleep deprived, if your baseline is with some sleep deprivation, or if you've accrued sleep debt, a long nap sometimes will lead to sleep inertia. That's that grogginess that you have when you wake up from the nap. And it can render some people pretty incapacitated for a time. There was trying to think what year this happened, where I think it was transatlantic flight. The pilot took a nap, and when he woke up, he had the sleep inertia, a horrible, he wasn't oriented. He didn't know he was confused and fuzzy headed, and he saw a planet and he thought it was a plane, and he did a nosedive to avoid it. Anyway, it ended up correcting itself, but people on that flight, the big stories about how unsafe sleep inertia can be. So you want to avoid that. So usually a nap 30 minutes or under will prevent that from happening. But some people will take longer ones, say to offset the effects of jet lag for international travel. I think they come in handy. Some people are better nappers than others. Some can't do it. Some drink a cup of coffee and then take a nap. It's someone coined the term. It's not mine. Nappuccino. So by the time the caffeine effects kick in and you get that rejuvenation from a nap and recharge from a nap, you're good to go.
And so just to take something from that, it sounds as though needing a nap isn't necessarily a sign that something is wrong with sleep. I mean, I know that if I haven't had a good night's sleep or have had less sleep than I'd like, then yes, I may definitely feel like I need a nap in the afternoon. But then there can also be days where I feel like I've had a reasonable night's sleep and I still feel like I could benefit from 10 minutes shut-eye in the afternoon.
Sure. And I think we all have a natural dip, in the afternoon about 2 p.m. And, I think it sort of depends on the situation. If you work from home and a 10-minute nap is feasible, that's one thing. If you're in a busy office environment, the other option, grab a cup of coffee, that kind of thing. So I think it depends, obviously, but I also think if you really are getting, say, a good amount of sleep at night, if you're a nighttime sleeper and you just really can't keep your eyes open during the day, again, that's something to sort of collect some data. If you don't have a tracker, keep a sleep diary and see if there are any sort of trends going on. And I would look at that in the context of napping, as I would in the context of reaching for caffeine all through the day to keep you going. I mean, you shouldn't have to do that to stay awake. And are you falling asleep at times when you unintentionally? I've had patients come to my clinic who have fallen asleep at a red light. Drowsy driving I hate the term drowsy driving. It's just such a lightweight term because it's as dangerous as drunk driving. But this happens where people will drive a few miles and just sort of not realize where they've been. They've had a micro sleep and it's like, oh my God, how can I be at this mile marker already? I don't even remember the last few seconds. It's a very, very dangerous thing. And I think we're a lot more mindful of not getting on the road if we've had some adult beverages or, appointed a designated driver. But see, we still don't have that healthy respect and a little bit of fear for sleep deprivation, or maybe a lot of fear we need. I still think people think they can overcome it and they'll, will themselves, I'll turn on the radio loudly, I'll chew ice, I'll chew gum, I'll open the window and sort of power through it. It doesn't work that way. Your brain will shut off if it gets tired enough. So I think a lot of us need a much more healthy respect and reverence for the biological need for sleep and how it really does sort of operate not always under our control like we think it does.
Let's talk about routines and those routines in particular that might help you to get sufficient quality of sleep. When does a routine start in your mind for sort of preparing to go to bed and go to sleep?
Starts the first thing in the morning, the very first thing. And I will preface this by saying our body clocks love repetitiveness, rhythm, and structure. And it's so important to get that daily rhythm and to stick to it. We love our clocks like consistency. So a consistent wake up time is how we start the day and get that morning natural light. It actually affects how you fall asleep at night. So early morning natural light helps sort of reset is the best way to describe it, your body clock. And then again, during the day, if you can possibly, if you need caffeine to get through the day all day, there's a problem. But if you have to, kind of get going in the morning, I would advise if you can stop caffeine after, say, lunchtime, try to do so. Stay hydrated. Hydration and sleep quality are intricately connected. It's real important. Dehydration will lead to trouble falling and staying asleep, even mild. I think physical activity is obviously a prerequisite for good sleep. But here's where we get into the thing, sleep deprived people are too tired to sleep, or some people say, I can't get up at 5 a.m. to go to the gym. And I hear you can't exercise it in the evening. That'll ruin your sleep. New research shows it will not ruin your sleep. Evening exercise. I'm usually at the gym between 7 and 9 at night, and I have pretty early bedtime, and that does not, I can't go to sleep unless I've had a good workout. But I tell people, even if you're not really physically active, if you're not in a good exercise routine, 10-minute walk, literally 10-minute walks, just such a little minor thing, can contribute, enhance sleep quality. So once that sleep quality, you've got the walk, then you have the sleep quality enhanced. So then you wake up more energized, more refreshed. Then you'll probably say, well, today I want 15 minutes. Next day I want 20 minutes. And that exercise leads to great sleep. And then great sleep has another bidirectional relationship with our diet and our food choices. The better we sleep, the better our food choices, which I think is really interesting. We don't have those cravings that we have when we're sleep deprived. And I've seen it. And you'll see me walking. If you see me in an airport at 6 a.m. walking by all the goodies, the cinnamon buns and the things that are fattening and the donuts and everything else. If I had an early flight and I'm running on too few hours of sleep, I want everything. And I don't even have a sweet tooth. It's so amazing how strong those cravings are. And I'm aware of it. And I know this happens when you don't have enough sleep on board. But think of the people that don't get enough sleep on a daily basis. Those cravings are, with them all the time. They crave sugar, fats, things to keep them energized, the sweets. They want that sugar rush to help their energy levels. But that kind of diet wreaks havoc on your sleep quality. So you kind of got to start, just be very aware and mindful of the food choices, knowing that will help you go to bed, fall asleep, and stay asleep. And again, start your day. So that daily rhythm, and again, back to your, what can you start doing? Consistent bedtimes. If you find a consistent bed and wake time that allow for the sufficient sleep that you need, try to stick to them. Try not to vary more than 2 hours, say on the weekend, if you have plans and things. That rhythm again, and that consistency really is key. And I greatly advise that bedtime routine that we know is essential for the little ones to get the kiddos asleep on time. They have to have that predictable, relaxing, very structured routine. It helps transition the mind and the body from wake to sleep. But adults need that too. And that really helps. And I know that we get so sidetracked. Definitely all these things compete for our time, especially at bedtime. So I always recommend setting a bedtime alarm to turn off the show, to turn off the electronics, and start preparing for bed, because that preparation time is fairly magical when it comes to falling asleep.
How far in advance of falling asleep is that a good thing to do? I'm just thinking about our own routine. We'll, switch off the TV at whatever time it is, go upstairs, clean our teeth, do whatever, and then basically go to bed. What's or if there is like the sort of optimum time before going to sleep that you shut down electronics?
If you possibly can do an hour and get it done, I'm sure it depends on a lot of things. I think up to an hour, and even earlier in the evening, I'd be very cognizant of dimming lights in the house. I'd also be cognizant of the bathroom lighting situation, because if you've had some dimming the lights, even in the evening, will help get that melatonin production going in our brain. So we need that melatonin to fall asleep and stay asleep. But what I see happening is, people kind of start chilling out in the evening, dim lights. We put electronics away an hour before. And then they start getting ready for bed, and boom, walk into this brightly lit bathroom. And there you go. There's that just whoop, stops the melatonin in its tracks. I would be just look at the bathroom lighting and make sure there's sort of, if you need bright lights during the day, perfect. But at night, see if there's some way to do night lighting. I've seen people telling me, oh, my kid gets a second wind every time I put him in the bathtub. And, I said, watch the lighting and don't have 4,000 wonderful fun toys, where it becomes this exciting thing. They will get a second wind, but, keep things mellow, chilled out and that kind of thing. And even, you'll think this is funny, but the toothpaste and mouthwash, you should have a morning version and a night version. Some of those things, those blasts of peppermint or spearmint, those are so alerting. And I say save those for morning time, but get something very bland for nighttime. We want to dial that all down to get ready for bed.
That's a new one on me. I've never heard of the idea of having like separate toothpastes. That's a fascinating one. Just thinking about the lighting, have you seen, when you've worked with people, any sort of clever little hacks? Because it's going to be beyond the bounds of a lot of people to, suddenly start installing dimmer lighting and whatever in their bathrooms. I mean, is there anything which you've seen people do which you thought it's quite clever?
I've seen people do several night lights. I always recommend amber night lights, sort of more of the red hue than the bright white. Some people just literally put a lamp somewhere safe in the bathroom. So there's, soft lamp light at night instead of the bright overhead if you don't have the dimmers. But even, while you're doing, it's nice to see people swapping out some of the electronics at night for activities that don't require the screens or bright lighting, in terms of things to do as a family or things to do individually. Just, reading, not a very bright light to read. Reading's a great thing to do before sleep. It's distracting. I think it's very hard. It's a tall order for a lot of people to sort of, okay, now I'm going to lie down in my bed and go to sleep. And we distract kids with bedtime stories. And that way they just sort of, go off to dreamland thinking about fantastical things sometimes, or, just gets their mind off of things. But with adults, we need to do the same thing. So, however you can do the light as best you can. And I guess in along those lines, and I mentioned before, the bedroom really has to be as dark as possible. And I've seen people with me installing the blackout shades. And I did this years ago. Of course, after spending, a year telling people they should have them, I finally, I thought, yeah, it's time to do this. It made a huge difference. I mean, and I'm super, super just hyper focused on everything sleep related, how I sleep, how I feel in the morning, everything in my environment. I'm very annoying to be around. But that morning I woke up, it was such a deep sleep. And because that room was pitch dark. I mean, pitch dark. And you'd be surprised at people, the adults in my workshop, that don't like to sleep in the dark. They like a light on. Now, which is interesting, or they want the TV on all night. Yeah. And that's a problem. They're not getting the sleep they need. Now, if you have to fall asleep with the TV on, I mean, if that's the only way you're going to fall asleep, do it. But put it on a timer. Put it on a timer. So pay attention to the lights.
And again, same question. There's going to be installing blackout blinds or whatever. It's not necessarily going to be a practical solution for everyone, or it's not going to be something that they can do right this minute. So again, are there any hacks which people can try as like an interim in terms of darkening the sleep environment?
Yeah, this is an interesting thing. The sleep masks are so amazing now. Now, years and years and years ago, I was trying them out, and it'd be like, oh God, it's caught in my hair. Oh, that's not comfortable. There are so many varieties out there now. And of course, I have companies send them to me all the time and say, try this out if you like it. And they're really comfortable ones out there now. And I've talked to people road warriors. I do a lot of work with how to get, the best sleep possible when you're traveling. And sleep masks can save the day. And we're talking $10. But that can do the trick. I mean, but that's, again, it's so remarkable, the difference. And I do talk to, if this is actually true for adults and children, trying to get away from sleeping with either a light in the room on, a light in the hallway, having that desire or feeling they can't sleep without a light. Fear of the dark transcends every age group. I've heard a lot about it. I've heard a lot of accounts about it, but try amber night lights. And I always say it's a progressive night light where it starts closer to the bed, but gradually is moved farther away from the bed and gradual. So it's not an abrupt sort of change from that night light. But if you need one, use amber. If you can, kind of graduate it out of the room at some point because you still want to get in the dark.
One of the things I'm sure I've heard is that the skin has light receptors, and so a sleep mask might not necessarily be completely effective. Is that the case, or is it just sort of it's a good start before you maybe get onto the stage of installing?
I think it's a good start. I think it is, and sometimes it might be just make or break it. I know when I travel, it's so unpredictable what my sleep environment's going to be. So that's something I bring, but it's definitely, I keep them handy. They stay in my suitcase. I mean, because of the light thing. I mean, I wish it weren't so important, but it is. And we've got to deal with it, as is the noise thing. How can we can't control our environment the way we like to. And like you say, some things are not feasible and not doable and out of our control, but there are things we can do to mitigate things and to lessen the disruption. We can do the white noise ceiling fans or the white noise app. We can have the portable white noise machines. I bring a small portable white noise machine when I travel because I can strategically place it. Like if I've got hallway noise, I can place that white noise machine between my hotel room door and the bed to help reduce unwanted noises. I bring earplugs. I'm not concerned that I won't hear the fire alarm or anything with the earplugs. I don't want to hear anything, but I'm sure that will go through the plugs should one happen. I will say though, kids are incredibly deep sleepers. So don't assume kids hear things like sirens or alarms. I mean, they need to be woken up. I know there was one child famous for sleeping through the sinking of the Titanic. Kids are in really deep sleep, much more than we are as adults during the night while they sleep. So don't assume your kid will get up and run when needed. But that's an important thing. Temperature is important. And I think all these things I'm outlining make it sound impossible to get some sleep. But having a bed partner as adults, I think that's something we should address while we're addressing the environment, because these things are all, what is, really too cold for me could be way too hot for my bed partner and vice versa. It's a mattress that's just soft the way I like it. I want to sleep on a marshmallow, and my bed partner says, no, that won't do. I mean, I think that's something I don't ever want one bed partner sacrifice sleep quality for the other person. As benevolent as that sounds and generous as that sounds, robbing yourself of sleep doesn't help anyone, yourself, the relationship, your health. To be a good partner, you need good sleep. It's a very, very important requirement for a good relationship with anyone and everyone. But for the bed partners, explore different options. There are now the mattress industry. I do a lot of consulting. Every year, there are really incredible advances in the technology, the way things are made. You can get a king size mattress now that's soft on one side, firm on the other. You can get them with cooling properties. You can get them so you can flip them over every 6 months like we used to do years ago. We've gone back to that. We can get them split down the middle. So one bed partner can have their head up. The other person can lie flat if that's their preference. I mean, there's so much, I think, pretty interesting new things that will enable people to get a good night's sleep while they share a bed. But also keep in mind, if you don't share a bed, that is fine. A lot of people can't get good sleep when they share a bed, and there's no shame in the game. That's not a negative. It's nothing negative about your relationship. I have thrown away the term sleep divorce. I only use the term independent sleeper from now on, because sleep is that important. I mean, you're really putting your mental health and physical health at risk when you don't get sleep. So don't shortchange yourself. Don't try to sleep with a snore if the snoring's bother you. Actually get the snoring, address the snoring, make sure it's not sleep apnea. Sleep really robs us and affects our personalities. A quick story, in our clinic, we had a middle-aged mother come in with a few kids of varying ages. She'd just falling asleep during the day was her primary presenting problem. We tested her. She had severe sleep apnea. We've treated her with CPAP, continuous positive airway pressure, to open her airways so she gets good sleep at night, doesn't stop breathing. She came back for a follow-up appointment 30 days later, and she sat down with her husband and said, "Thank you for giving me my wife back." And he said she had been the most irritable. He said, just short-tempered, moody, impossible to live with. I mean, just all of this stuff. And it had all been tied to sleep. So again, sleep deprivation goes way, way beyond feeling sleepy. And that's the message I really want to bring home today. Like, it's more than being sleepy. It's really compromising your quality of life in all these arenas. So it's so important to be mindful. I think we've definitely paid attention to our furnishing our kitchens and how we do our kitchens. I think we can do the same for our bedrooms. We've looked at time management. There are surveys saying there are some people here that spend 5 hours a day on electronics or watching television and not getting the sleep they need at night. Oh my gosh, that makes me want to pull my hair out. So manage your time. But see, we're better at time management when we get enough sleep. We make better decisions. We have better judgments. So sometimes that lack of sleep makes us make poor decisions. We can't manage our time. We're not organized, and we take risks where we don't have to.
If I go back and listen to a recording of this episode, I reckon that I will probably easily be able to write down 20 or 30 possible sleep tips, which is incredibly helpful, but I'm conscious that it could also be quite overwhelming. So for the person who's listening to this and just kind of goes, "No way, this is just too much," where might be the best place that someone can just start, get an easy win that is not going to require too much effort, frankly?
There's the Better Sleep Council, and that has bettersleep.org has great information about sleep. The American Academy of Sleep Medicine.
Just in terms of a habit rather than resource, though. So, I mean, someone who's...
the resources.
Yeah, so someone who has heard that they can do this, they can do that, they can do that, and so on and so forth. If someone wants to just implement one of the things that you have suggested as a means of improving sleep, what's a good one thing to begin with?
Prioritize and schedule. If you schedule sleep, I mean, okay, I will say, here's something, do a 2-week challenge. 30 days, I used to do it for 30 days. It's too long. People will see incredible benefits in 2 weeks if they've been not getting the sleep they need on a daily basis, either intermittently or chronically for a while. But for 2 weeks, schedule sleep. That's the first step to take, because a lot of us lose our point of reference when we're sleep deprived. And our insight is the first thing, one of the first things to go when we're not getting enough sleep. We have no self-awareness and we have no insight to what's going on. We lose our point of reference. To feel well rested, I talk to people in their early 30s and they say, "Well, I'm 33. I know I'm going to feel terrible when I wake up in the morning." And no, you're not. No. You're not getting good sleep, or you're not getting enough sleep. But schedule it, and everything else should come after that. I say re-engineer your day, so you get that re-engineered night of sleep. And I think, Jeremy, it's important. once people feel the difference, it can actually be pretty life-changing. But once they feel the difference and renewed energy and seeing that, they can achieve their diet goals and their health, they have all of a sudden their healthy weight management, and they feel like going to work out, or they feel like going for a walk, or they're happier, or they're more motivated. See, this has been this horrible swap that people have done. They've done this thing. They rob Peter to pay Paul. They want more waking hours to get more done, to do more, to become successful, whatever it is. They want more waking hours. So they take hours from sleep just to have more waking hours. And that's a recipe for disaster. What you do is get your sleep, because you get more done. You do it better. You're happier. You're more careful. You're healthier. You're more motivated when you get the sleep. So we actually do more when we're well rested. So don't go hour by hour and trying to do that juggling act. It doesn't work.
Fantastic. Okay, you mentioned the Better Sleep Counsellor as a possible resource, and I'll certainly put a link to that in the show notes. Any other resources you'd like to mention? We talked about the book last time, but I've completely forgotten who it was by and what it was called, but it came out quite relatively recently.
Why We Sleep?
That's the one, yeah.
Yep, Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. It's been out a few years. It's a fantastic book. That's a great one. He knows a lot about sleep, and he's a great writer. So that's a great one. And I think the more you learn about the benefits of sleep, and it's very interesting, actually. I mean, some of the latest research is exciting. There's always new research and telling us different things. I think the more we know about it, the more we'll get it. I don't have to nag people. Once they start learning about it, they're pretty motivated to get it. So I think it's important that your listeners look at sufficient sleep as a personal, a family, a classroom, and a workplace goal and value to embody. And then things are better in every way, shape, or form.
Terry, if someone wants to find out more about you or get hold of you, where would you like to send them?
My website is terrycrallern.com. I am on Twitter and LinkedIn, so feel free to visit me. And I'm posting pretty recent research, almost daily on LinkedIn and on Twitter, and it's fascinating stuff, and it's a good thing to get involved with.
As always, I'll put links to those in the show notes. Terry, thank you so much. An absolute wealth of tips. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your knowledge.
Thank you, Jeremy, for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, hope you enjoyed that interview with Terry Cralle. Terry had so much advice for you there that I could see how it could get a little bit overwhelming knowing where to start, and that was why I was quite keen to press Terry on that. But speaking from my own experience, and I'm recording this a couple of days after the interview with Terry, I've already started trying her techniques for when you wake up in the middle of the night, just quieting your brain, and in particular not worrying about the fact that you're still awake. Now, I'm pretty good with my bedtime routine. I usually go to bed at a fairly reasonable time where I'm pretty sure that if I sleep through, then I will have enough sleep for the following day. But when I wake up in the middle of the night, and in particular if it takes me a long time to get back to sleep, I do get quite paranoid about the fact that the amount of sleep I'm getting is going down and down and down. And, I'm still going to get up at the same time because that's what time my alarm clock goes. And so I worry that it's going down from 8 hours to 7 hours to 6.5 to 6. Since the interview with Terry, I've been forcing myself to say, hey, you know what? This is normal. This is natural. It's okay. Nothing's going to break. I'll be all right. So let's just not worry about how much sleep I'm not getting as a result of being awake now. And it does seem to be working. I do seem to be able to get back to sleep just that little bit quicker. There's a couple of other things which Terry mentioned which I'm quite keen to try out, but I was aware of the fact that really I just needed to start with one. And maybe that's something that you can do. Just pick the one tip which you thought, oh, yeah, I can do that. I'll start there and see what effect that has. Full show notes with a transcript, a summary of everything we talked about, and links to the resources mentioned there at changeworklife.com/162. That's changeworklife.com/162. And I think it's been a few weeks since I've said this, but please, if you could, leave a review, preferably on Apple Podcasts. Spotify will do, but I'd prefer Apple Podcasts. If you can leave a review for Change Work Life on Apple Podcasts, it just helps people know that this is a podcast that is worth their time. And hopefully, after listening to this episode, you think it is too. We've got some great episodes coming up in the run-up to the end of the year, so make sure that you subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. There must be a button somewhere on the app that you're using where you can subscribe, so do that, make sure you never miss an episode, and I can't wait to see you next time. Cheers, bye.